Governor Matt Mead here on SVI Media. Governor, thanks so much for your time today. First off, tell us why it was important for you to come here today for the funeral of Delane Roberts.
Well, as you looked at the number of people who turned out, clearly he was beloved in this community, but he was beloved beyond this community in this state. And I got to know him in 1991 when he was the United States Marshal, and I always knew him as the Marshal because the way he conducted himself with integrity, his search for justice, with compassion, and everything he did, he set an example for those around him. And so it's been a privilege to have known him. And his bounds go way beyond just the boundaries of this community, and his service in the military, his service in his church, his service in the state legislature. He was a sheriff. He was a U.S. Marshal. I mean, his career is absolutely extraordinary. But what makes him most extraordinary was just the type of man he was, his character, and that is why he has this wonderful legacy of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. It's why he has this wonderful legacy for those of us who were privileged to have known him. Not only did he enrich our lives, he made you want to be a better person, and he did it by the example he set. So it's a privilege to be here today as we mourn one of Wyoming greats who has passed on.
When you look back at Delane's life and his accomplishments, if you had to pick maybe just one thing that was maybe his biggest contribution to the state of Wyoming, what might that be?
Well, outside of faith and family, which was personal to him, I guess I would say, because it's based upon my experience working with him as U.S. Marshal, he was an extraordinary U.S. Marshal. And I joked today that I didn't even know he had a first and last name because I always knew him as the Marshal because of the way he did that job. And and it's not just the nuts and bolts of it, but just with such integrity and just had created such a sense of you knew when he was on the job things were going to come out okay. But add that to the legislature, to his work in the church, to his work on the Wildlife Trust Fund. He was the first chairman, and had he not been the first chairman, I don't know what it had the success that it did. So there is too many things to count, but in everything he did, not only did he do it well, but he's left this wonderful legacy where we can look back and say he's a man who left his mark in Wyoming for generations.
Governor, this is your second trip to Star Valley. Just the past couple months, you were here to walk through the LDS temple. Now, there's a handcart donated for part of that celebration. Tell us a little bit about that and the story behind it.
Well, first it was a treat to have the open house at the temple, which, by the way, is just so magnificent as a building. But beyond that, to have that in Wyoming just means so much. And I hearken back to my great-grandparents homesteaded over in the Jackson Hole area. And, through the stories of the generations, I always remember my family being so grateful for the LDS faith, not only because of their family, the association and the strong families, but frankly, a lot of Jackson Hole wouldn't be Jackson Hole without the great skill of LDS irrigators. I mean, they built the ditches, they built the canals in many places over there. So always grateful for that, but beyond that, as we see the strong faith and the strong families the LDS community in Wyoming provides, the temple was, it's a big deal for all of us. And so my wife and I have a ranch, and it was the ranch of the first sworn peace officer of the territory of Wyoming, Mr. N.K. Boswell. And when we bought the place in a very, very old barn that Mr. Boswell built, there is what we believe is a Mormon handcart, and we have had that there, and we think it's an important piece of history. And my wife Carol and I were trying to think of the best way to make sure that was preserved. And so I thought the temple occasion was a wonderful thing and an opportunity for us to donate it and to hopefully have that as a continuing part of the LDS history. And for us, Carol and I, it was a way to recognize what the LDS faith has meant to our history as a state and to our future as a state.
So do you know what the plan is for that handcart once it was donated?
Well, I believe Senator Dan Dockstader is going to be gracious enough. He's going to actually come by the ranch, and he offered to do it just in the next few days, but I wouldn't be there, and I want to actually help him load it because it's all the way across the state. And then I think they're going to get it, and with the wonderful historians the LDS faith has. Hopefully, they'll be able to tell where it came from and maybe some of the history on it. But it's a remarkable piece. You know, the wooden spokes and hub, and it's been used. It certainly doesn't look like it just came off the showroom floor, but hopefully it's of some value and some worth. For certainly more worth to the temple here than to just sit in our barn. So.
Governor, thanks for your time. Any other comments about Delane or the handcart that you'd like to mention today?
Well, just on Delane, you know, it's a wonderful family, and I think all of Wyoming, those of us who are privileged to walk and alongside him for a period of time, we're all better for it. And so, what a wonderful man, and a loss for all of us.
Governor Matt Mead, SBI Media.